As the population of Phoenix rapidly increases, concerns about the environment are both inevitable and necessary. The real estate market is booming locally, driving even more transplants from other states into Arizona. Discussions around how to create an eco-friendly Grand Canyon state, who should be held accountable, are commonplace. Opinions, questions, and solutions on eco-friendly topics span the generations. Good morning, I'm your host Julie, and I'm joined by local Arizona high school students from Spot 127 Youth Media Center. Today, we will be considering Arizona's sustainability issues from a team perspective on this episode of Spot On. Zion, in what ways are humans inherently bad for the environment?
I think it's kind of this misconception that humans kind of recently started living unnaturally, and obviously carbon emissions and the use of fossil fuels and all that stuff is relatively recent, but humans have been led to deforestation forever, and even before hunter-gatherer civilizations, even before human civilizations, hunter-gatherers us, when Homo sapiens popped up on the scene and started exploring the world, it led to large extinctions. And it's kind of a debated topic, but it's not a coincidence that the second Homo sapiens showed up on the Australian continent or the North American continent, all the megafauna there suddenly went suddenly reduced. So I think it's kind of this thing that humans are unnatural, but nature is random. We just kind of spawned out of it. I think the debate around climate change and environmental sustainability is an economic one, a moral one, and a self-preservation one. Self-preservation, because we got to live on here. If the sea levels rise, and that's going to screw all of us over. An economic one for the same reason, and moral one because I think it's kind of our the animals that we're kind of screwing over. You can kind of argue when something becomes moral, but I think that since they can suffer, I think that's kind of a good bar to set morality on. So if we're causing animals to suffer and not doing anything about it, I think that's a bit immoral.
And Rain, what do you think?
I agree on Zion. I agree with Zion. Humans are bad for the environment. We consume. That's what we do. We how do we help the earth? We don't, unless it's an internet fad or something. On the regular, most people's days go something like this: wake up, brush your teeth, do your hair, eat breakfast, get in your car, go to work, come home, watch some TV, eat dinner, and go to bed. When did you do anything to help the earth? We don't. It's all we think about is ourselves and sometimes our families, but we don't think about the greater scheme of how we're affecting the planet and what we're doing to harm other generations.
So according to Tess Riley from The Guardian, just 100 companies have been the source of more than 70% of the world's emissions. Amelia, is sustainability the responsibility of everyday consumers or large corporations?
I think that sustainability is it's a responsibility of everyone, but I do think that larger companies can make a bigger and more lasting impact than the everyday person. So I think that it's the consumer's job to kind of hold the companies accountable to what they're doing and kind of push them in the direction of using more safe things for their products, or to kind of advocate for safer things for the world, really.
All right, and Zion, what do you think?
I kind of agree. It's two-person thing. So obviously companies, they not only mean to production, they're the one drilling the oil, they're the ones building the factories that are putting carbon emissions in the air, but they're gonna follow the money. So it's kind of our recently, where do you think companies have been donating more to Pride and BLM, and not just putting a rainbow flag on the Twitter logo, donating actual money, and a lot of that is a bit vapid and they don't actually believe in it, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day as long as those companies and those ideas get spread, at least in my opinion. And I think that you can kind of do the same thing with environmental sustainability. If there's more of a base and a demand for it, the companies will kind of follow that. And I think the other thing that you kind of have to look to is the reason that corn and meat are so cheap are because of government subsidies. Like these things are like really expensive to produce, but because the government gives out a lot of subsidies for them, they're like cheaper to the average consumer. And if the government does the same thing for environmental sustainability and there's more demand for environmental sustainability within the populace, the politicians will see that and also follow that, or at least hopefully.
Oh, shit. And Sabrina?
Yeah, I think it takes two to tango. It's both going to be the consumer and it's going to be the companies that are responsible for climate change. And that's exactly what Zion is saying, is that the consumer is the one who's going to guide that company to doing what they want. And so if the consumer wants more sustainable practices from that company, then it's going to have to be the consumer who shows that by saying, okay, we're not going to buy from you unless you start taking on these practices. And it's also the responsibility of the government to say, okay, the climate is changing and we need to make regulations. And so if we can appeal to a company through subsidizing certain foods and maybe focusing more on vegetable production than meat production, which is a sustainable practice, then we can help the climate and help our citizens. And, in the end, prices are going to go down because it's going to be easier to produce foods. I also think, though, that without companies, the individual has to take responsibility for some things with climate change. Like, I think that people should start changing their diets, and I think people should focus more on doing little things, not expensive things like buying from sustainable companies necessarily, because that's not affordable to everyone, but involving less meat in your diet and buying more vegetables, or trying to reuse certain things you get. Like if you have a glass bottle and using that for something else instead of just throwing it away or breaking it and letting it become trash. And so I think the individual alone without the company has a responsibility to fulfill, and the company has a responsibility to fulfill. And while those two things do intersect, both things can also be separate. So yeah.
So Onea, we discussed problematic companies earlier. What are some sustainable companies that we should support?
So I think it's definitely important to support eco-friendly companies that are making more sustainable products. Reflecting off of what other people have said, it's a lot about supply and demand. So if there's more demand for sustainable products, then companies will naturally be more inclined to make them and make them ethical and more eco-friendly because there's more demand for it. So many people know about IKEA. They're a furniture company, and so far they've been switching out their LEDs for more energy efficient options and also investing in more renewable energy. But the problem is that there's a lot of less known companies that are also making. For example, 10 Tree is a clothing company that plants 10 trees for every purchase you make. They are committed to using the lowest carbon possible and also making sustainable products. So far, they have planted over 57 million trees from their purchases, and that's a huge impact because trees help absorb carbon dioxide and contribute to a cleaner, less polluted air. So I would recommend doing some more research on companies that are trying to be more sustainable and make eco-friendly products because they're not really well known, and you'll have to do some research to find out more about them.
And Alex, what do you think?
I definitely agree with Olnea. I really think it's super important to do research on the companies that you're buying from, especially kind of like what their ethics are, what their policies are, and like kind of where they're getting their materials from. Like a lot of brands, you want to see like if they're B Corp brands or if they're cruelty free. So that's like a big thing, is doing research and making sure that you're supporting brands that align with your own morals and with sustainable practices. But that's not always affordable to everybody. So a lot of other things that you can do just kind of in your everyday life is like buying from local businesses, like going to local farmers markets or buying from local grocers. You can get like a lot of different products that you use in your household. Also, another big thing is like buying groceries in bulk. Like Sprouts is a large corporation, but they also allow you that sustainable option to buy your own groceries in bulk. Even like during the pandemic, I believe they're still able to include some of that, like some of those sustainable practices. Kind of in general, there are several like online sustainable marketplaces that you can go to. I would recommend Public Goods or Package Free. They're both very affordable and online, like sustainable marketplaces. And there are also other marketplaces that you can look into that like have artisans and small businesses that put their products on there. So it just has to do with like a lot of research and looking into different stores that are available.
And Elvis?
Yeah, I do agree that we should be researching more into what we buy, if they're eco-friendly or just buying from eco-friendly organizations. I think that's a very good idea. Yeah.
So Sabrina, how can we combat unsustainable farming practices?
I think we can combat unsustainable farming practices by implementing regulations. We have to make sure that what's being produced in farms is going to be a sustainable practice in where we live. Like in Arizona, we have a lot of farming, but we really have to focus on what's going to be the best to farm in Arizona. Like we can't really farm grapes in Arizona. There are a lot of produce that if we farm it in Arizona, it's going to be a lot less sustainable than if we farmed it somewhere with better light and better weather, like somewhere like California. And so I think that people in agriculture, people who work for the state, really need to start focusing on implementing these regulations, saying, you know, you can't farm things like grapes. You can only farm for this much land for this many animals, because animals also take a lot of food and a lot of water and a lot of resources. And I think we really have to focus on what are we producing, where are we producing it, and how many resources are going to each of these things, because it's going to be easier to farm acres of corn than to farm acres of animals, because you're getting a lot more produce for a lot less land. And I think we really have to just stand our ground with that.
All right, and Alex?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with everything Sabrina said, especially about making sure that the crops that we're growing here in Arizona are meant to be grown in Arizona and work with kind of like our dry and very hot environment. Also, there's like several new practices that have been coming up, like one being regenerative farming. That's been around for a while, but more recently and very pertinent to Arizona is agrivoltaics, which is basically the combination of solar energy and solar panels with agriculture. And so it really helps a lot with like several different aspects, because with this like solar plants and like solar farms that we have in Arizona, those take up a lot of space. And if they can be used in the same place that crops are grown, it gives farmers a steadier source of income, and it also conserves space. Also, when these like solar farms are created, the earth has to be packed down really tightly, which leads to a lot of soil erosion, which is basically leads to a lot of pollution, and it's really bad for like the health of the soil and like the soil richness. And so when we can put solar panels on top of crops, the land has like already been pretty packed down enough to where the solar panels can be on it. And that way, and then the solar panels the soil isn't eroded because it has to be packed down, and the panels actually prevent soil erosion because they can block some of the wind that happens. And also with the shade provided by solar panels, it helps with like water retention, so plants don't need as much water, and they're given more shade, so plants that don't like the sun as much can grow a little bit better.
Olnea, should sustainability lessons be mandatory in schools? How and when do we start to educate them?
Yeah, I definitely think that sustainability lessons should be mandatory in schools. I think it's really important to educate our younger generations as early as possible to start learning about the condition of our environment, the path we're headed on, and how they can contribute to a cleaner earth. I think parents play a huge responsibility in the education of their children. I think it's important that parents help them develop healthy habits at an early age, like not wasting water or food, being more energy efficient, learning how to conserve resources and recycle. Those kind of things are really important because if you can develop those at a young age, you'll carry on those habits for hopefully most of your life. And in school, sustainability lessons can start as simple as like just reading the Lorax in second grade and reflecting on it. And as the school curriculum gets more challenging in higher grades, you can start introducing research projects, maybe ask students to look around and observe pollution happening around them. And eventually the goal would be to raise awareness of the current climate change issue that we're facing and hopefully inspire our generation to vote for leaders that will hopefully bring in new environmental policies that will help our environment.
And Amelia, what do you think?
So I agree. I think it's so important to educate people, especially the younger generations right now, on all of the environmental issues that are going on because they're going to be kind of growing up into it. And obviously in the future, it's just getting worse and worse from here. So they're going to have to kind of inherit this like dying earth, and they need to know what they can do to fix it, or they need to know what they can do to kind of help the situation that they're going to be in.
Nanak, how about you?
Well, I think the topic of sustainability lessons is very interesting because global warming and climate change is not something that can be tackled by an individual. It's, of course, a very global issue. But I think simply the awareness of knowing that the Earth is dying and in trouble is very significant. And our future generations, just having this knowledge of the issue is a big step in the process of solving the issue itself. So I do think that having these mandatory lessons would be very beneficial, simply for just letting people know that the problem is out there and it needs to be solved, because you got to start somewhere.
And so, Alessandra, how does social media play a role in people's sustainable lifestyles?
Social media can be used to positively or negatively influence people, especially about sustainability, because there can be influencers who try to promote a product of a sustainable product that can help the environment. There's also different resources that can be given and used about sustainability, but it all comes down to the consumers and the people using and watching social media and then their decisions. But there's always going to be the different people who say that we should do something and then do nothing at all, or the people who don't think it's a real issue or something we should worry about, and then the people who are trying to do something and make a difference. And that's the real difference.
And Lagaya, what do you think?
Social media is probably today's number one mode of socialization, and its role in sustainability is to inform. When influencers and other public figures influence, certain sustainable products, that's always a different conversation. But when you're looking up, places to buy your clothes, places to buy your groceries, there's always that information available to find what is sustainable and find what is a eco-friendly choice. And that's kind of what plays into the consumer responsibility in making this movement happen, is physically going and looking up and educating yourself. And it's always difficult, for people to see, oh, it might be more expensive, it might consume more time, more energy, but it is a humane duty for us to carry out. So social media plays this role in giving us that information everywhere you look: TikTok, YouTube ads, Instagram, in the tree planting search engine Ecosia. Just even looking up information can contribute to bettering the health of the planet.
And Sabrina?
Yeah, I agree with what Guy was saying, is that social media is a huge resource for being more sustainable and starting to get knowledge about how to start that sustainable lifestyle, whether you want to be zero waste or you just want to start taking on new practices that can help save the environment. But there are always going to be two sides to the internet, and while you can find sustainability, you can also find a lot of people telling you to continue to consume and brands telling you to consume fast fashion. You can see Instagram brands advertising for new and up and coming sustainable resources, but then you also get H&M and Forever 21 ads telling you to continue buying their new collections, even though it's fast fashion. A lot of it's produced in foreign countries, like that are paying minimal wage and really not helping the environment whatsoever. And so I think educating yourself even before you hop onto that social media platform and following the right people on social media to get the right information is the best way to use social media as a useful resource in being more sustainable.
Okay, Rain, is it too late to do anything about climate change?
I think, yeah, we're probably doomed. According to NASA, the world's oceans have risen 4 inches since 1996. And I know that doesn't sound like very much, but like across 327 million square miles, that's a lot of water. It's like also just in 25 years. So I think it's extremely difficult to get 7.9 billion people who all speak different languages and all try to reverse the effects of climate change and save the world. After all, we have people who don't even care about their neighbors' lives, much less their own. And like, how are they going to do anything about trying to fix climate change? Like, much less the whole world and future generations. They just don't care. So it's going to be very, very difficult to motivate people that just like don't care. It's not going to be an easy task.
And Zion?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Rain on this. We're kind of screwed. We can try to slow it down as much as we want, and technology is wild. Who knows what the future holds? But like, yeah, we're kind of like, I think recently we've kind of seen how difficult it is to get the worldwide audience to unite against the common enemy, especially since global warming is slow and it's difficult to see, and it requires self-sacrifice in some sense. It's just not, and like you got to get big corporations in on it as well. It's like a difficult thing to realistically do. I guess the best we could hope for is Mars.
So, Alessandra, what do you think the world will look like for future generations?
I think that at this rate, the world isn't going to be looking too good, with too many people sitting at home doing nothing, not even trying, and then the people who are trying to make a difference, but nobody's listening. Everything's really far gone already.
And Nana?
Yeah, thank you, Julie. I have a very grim outlook for the future. And in all honesty, while I would like to be hopeful and say that everything's going to be okay and it'll be able to be solved, I don't think that's going to be an option for our future generations. I think that we're going to be dumping our problems onto them and the chances of climate change and global warming being dumbed down to a level that is able to be dealt with by the time that, we have to move off the planet if it gets too extreme, I think the chances of that are very low. I think we are indeed gifting a dying Earth to our future.
And Ligaya?
I have to agree with everyone. It's almost devastating, the kind of changes we've made to this planet. We know that biomes are going to collapse within 20, 30 years, but with the collaboration of the minds and like the initiative and leadership that everyone in Gen Z and everyone in this podcast today has shown, I think we could work and do our best. It won't be easy. It won't be anywhere near reverting back to a perfect planet, but it's definitely worth the try. Colonizing Mars is really not going to teach humans their lesson, and we're just going to consume. And while that's, colonizing Mars would be a dream, it's not the best possible solution, and we really need to do our part.
And Raina, do you have any final thoughts on today's conversation?
Thank you, Julie. As we can see, there's a lot of optimistic and grim outlooks on how we will move forward in the future with sustainability and our environment and how our planet is dying and what we can do to help better that. Even though we have like a lot of negative outlooks on what's happening right now and what could happen to the future and how we will progress forward, we also see that there are solutions that people in our generation have to move forward in a more sustainable way. It's a very tough hill to climb up, but I think with the determination that our generation has already shown and with the help of social media and all the other points that people have made previously, I think it is possible. And seeing how people have realistic outlooks on how we can move forward, I think that in the future, we can have an optimistic view on a better world.
Thank you for the summary, Raina. Clearly, there are many additional untouched ideas to consider. However, we Arizonians need to do something right now if we plan to live comfortably in future decades. The longer we delay and wait for a positive impact to happen magically, the sooner we are doomed. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have for this conversation. I'd like to thank my guests for joining me today and you, the viewer, for tuning in. Tell us what you think in the comments down below. As always, subscribing and liking the video helps our webcast going. From Spot 127, I am Julie, and this has been another episode of Spot On.